Out here in the mountains, no one will find you. After all, you're just a stranger to us. Take care now." With a loud slam, my mother-in-law shut the door of her fancy RR. The sound echoed sharply in the still air. Gravel flew as the tires spun, and then she drove off, leaving me alone. Under the pale moonlight, I saw her face clearly for the first time. A cruel smile stretched across it, and her eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, like a predator watching its prey. She looked at me with confidence, as if she'd already won. "Why, Mom?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling, but it disappeared into the night, drowned out by her triumphant laughter. Her laugh was unlike anything I'd heard before, stripped of kindness and full of malice. The cold winter wind brushed against my cheek as I stood frozen, watching her lean out of the car window. She pointed at me and laughed again. "Goodbye, dear Justine. No one's coming to save you. By tomorrow, you'll just be food for the wolves." Her words struck me like a knife made of ice, sharp and cruel. The roar of the RR's engine cut through the silence as the headlights slowly disappeared into the darkness. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. I reached for my phone, but the screen stayed dark. That's when I remembered she had borrowed my charger earlier, claiming she wanted to take pictures. It all made sense now. She had planned this from the start, using the excuse of showing me a beautiful stargazing spot and driving us 100 miles out here. Everything clicked in my mind, but it was too late. Maybe if I'd tried harder to understand her, or taken things more seriously with my husband, they would have accepted me into the family. Maybe things wouldn't have come to this. The distant cries of animals pierced the silence, making me shiver. I hugged myself tightly against the biting cold, feeling as though unseen eyes were watching me from the shadows between the trees. Fear spread through me, and my whole body began to tremble. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps crunching through the dry leaves, getting closer. My heart pounded wildly as I took shaky steps, unsure if I should run or stay. I started to step back, unsure where to go in the pitch-black darkness. I didn't know which direction was safe. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps behind me. "My name is Justine Musk. I'm 27 years old and have been married to my husband, Olivier, for 3 years. Olivier has always been kind to me. He's helped me so many times with his gentle support, whether I was feeling unwell or stressed from work. On late nights, he'd even cook dinner for me. Marrying him felt like the best decision I'd ever made. I did everything I could to support him, just as he supported me. I come from a well-off family. My parents' success gave me a comfortable childhood, full of opportunities like lessons and travel. But they never pressured me to follow a certain path. They let me grow up freely, and I'm grateful for that. My friends often admire my independence and strength. Though I appreciate my parents' support, I've always taken pride in my own efforts. I know money can't solve everything, and it's how you use it that really matters. Maybe that's why I didn't want to be seen as someone who relied on family wealth. I kept my family's financial status a secret from Olivier because I wanted to build my life based on my own work. Both Olivier and I loved our jobs in the bridal industry. I had a wonderful boss, kind colleagues, and juniors who looked up to me. My work brought me so much joy, and I was surrounded by amazing people. I felt genuinely happy. One day, though, Olivier decided to quit his well-paying job to start his own business. At first, I thought it was a pity since he had worked so hard to get that job, but I understood his desire to build his own future. Even though I felt worried, I trusted him and chose to support him. His determination reminded me of my own drive. I promised myself that I would stand by him, no matter what challenges came with his business. But then, I found out something that shattered me. Olivier had been involved with another woman from his university days. Not only that, but he had racked up $70,000 in debt from expensive trips with her. At that moment, my world started to crumble. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. When I learned the truth, it crushed me. I cried for days, horrified by my own ignorance. Despite the debt Olivier had, he went ahead and started a business, with that woman by his side. Starting a business is expensive, and I supported him without knowing the full story. Once, I asked him how he planned to handle the finances and wondered how he was affording everything. He told me his family was helping him. That surprised me because I'd never thought about relying on family for financial support. Olivier's mother, Kate, adored him and openly favored him. Even though he was an adult, she still treated him like a child and justified everything she did as being for her son. She even accused me of being after Olivier's income, despite my own successful career. Sure, Olivier had a good job, but I wasn't planning to quit mine and depend on his earnings. I had made that very clear to her. I continued working and contributing to our household, just as I had before we got married. We both agreed to manage our expenses individually and save when necessary. I tried explaining this to Kate, but she refused to believe me. She acted like I was some kind of enemy, as if I'd stolen her son away from her. It was exhausting, but I tried to be patient, knowing that conflicts with in-laws aren't unusual. Thankfully, we didn't live together, so I only had to deal with her occasional messages or surprise visits. But Kate wasn't the only problem. Olivier's sister, Brittany, was just as difficult. Brittany didn't work and relied completely on Olivier's income. He even sent her a monthly allowance. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just his way of being generous. Brittany once told me she quit her job because her boss asked her to be more professional. She complained, why should someone act superior just because they were born earlier? She and I were close in age, but her attitude made me think, kids these days. It felt like she embodied the worst traits of Gen Z entitlement. Talking to her was draining, to say the least. I always had to be careful about how I acted around Brittany, trying to keep her happy. Even with all my frustrations with Olivier's family, I was happy with him. I truly hoped our peaceful life would last forever. For a while, after Olivier's business took off, everything seemed stable. That reassured me. I believed he treated his employees well, which brought me some comfort. But soon, Kate and Brittany started visiting more often, usually without warning. They would go through my belongings, using my branded items and posting photos online, as if they owned them. I politely asked them to stop, but they brushed me off. We're family, so anything in Olivier's house is ours to use, they'd say. The worst part? Most of the items they used were things I'd bought with my own money. Still, I stayed quiet for Olivier's sake, even though it was slowly wearing me down. Coming home became stressful. I dread finding them rummaging through my things. I loved high-quality branded items, not for their logos, but for their design and durability. To me, they represented my financial independence, something my mother always encouraged. Invest in quality, and it will last, she used to say. But seeing Kate and Brittany mishandle my cherished belongings was heartbreaking. They didn't care about the items, they only used them to show off online. Every night, I found myself carefully cleaning my bags and accessories after they'd finished with them. I tried convincing myself that maybe I was being too sensitive, that my feelings were the problem. But one day, Kate crossed a line. She took one of my favorite bags without asking, a simple brown purse, beautifully made and easy to carry, and managed to ruin it. I couldn't understand how she'd broken something so well-crafted. I thought she'd feel sorry, but instead, she refused to apologize. It was bought with Olivier's money, so I don't owe you anything, she said coldly. I felt crushed. Even though I earned a good income, I couldn't afford to keep replacing expensive items. I reminded her that the bag wasn't bought with Olivier's money. It was mine. But my words fell on deaf ears. I had bought the bag long before I got married. It was my first big purchase, something I dreamed of owning for years. But Kate scoffed at me.
Yeah, right.
Girls like, you don't have money for things like that. Stop pretending. She'd already labeled me as a gold digger, someone who spent Olivier's money on luxuries. Talking to her felt hopeless. She wasn't even trying to understand me. To her, I was the enemy. When I tried to talk to Olivier about it, he barely paid attention. Just hold on a little longer. Mom's going through a tough time, he said. His words hurt. I felt ignored, even by the person I relied on the most. I had always seen myself as strong and independent, but feeling so alone was overwhelming. Around this time, Olivier's business started struggling. He couldn't even afford to keep up with Kate and Brittany's lifestyle anymore. Finally, he told them he could no longer support them financially. Both Kate and Brittany, who had relied entirely on him, panicked. I thought this might push them to get jobs, but they had no interest in working. Take some of the money Justine's been getting from Olivier and give it to us. Family should come first, Kate said. I tried explaining again that I shared household expenses with Olivier and used my own income for everything else. But they refused to believe me and insisted I was living off Olivier's money. Their frustration only grew, and they started visiting less often. For a moment, I thought they might actually consider finding jobs. I was wrong. They weren't planning to work. They were plotting something else. They had decided that if I were out of the picture, they could take full control of Olivier's finances. With his business nearing bankruptcy, they were desperate to maintain their luxurious lifestyle. Even though they hardly worked, they felt entitled to the comforts they had always enjoyed. Eventually, they discovered that my family was wealthy. Now, their focus shifted. They wanted access to my money too. Kate's resentment toward me grew stronger with each passing day. It seemed like she had convinced herself that if I weren't around, she and Brittany could have everything they wanted. Kate convinced herself that if I disappeared, she and Brittany would inherit everything. She even imagined a fortune worth hundreds of millions, though that was far from the truth. I hadn't even written a will, and if I had, my family, not them, would be the beneficiaries. It was terrifying how Kate's obsession with money twisted her mind. She began plotting to get rid of me, all to secure her own comfort and lifestyle. Kate knew I loved photography, especially capturing the night skies. She researched remote locations with little human presence and picked a spot where no one would find me. Her plan was horrifying. Take me there and leave me to face whatever dangers the wilderness had in store. Out here, no one will ever find you, she must have thought. It's bear season. It'll look like an accident. She even discussed her plan with Brittany, who agreed without hesitation. I'll drive for you, Mom. It's for Olivier, Brittany said, though it was clear this wasn't about Olivier. It was about them. The day of their plan, Kate called and invited me to go stargazing. It had been a while since they visited, and both of them seemed unusually kind and friendly. I heard you love taking pictures, Justine. There's a spot nearby with stunning stars, Kate said, showing me the location on her phone. It was a famous spot among photographers. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. On the drive, they acted strangely warm. Your hair is so beautiful, Justine. What shampoo do you use? Kate asked, smiling. I'm so glad to have a stylish daughter-in-law like you. I've always wanted a daughter. Their compliments and cheerful chatter about fashion and beauty made me feel uneasy, but a part of me thought maybe they were finally accepting me. By the time we reached the spot, I had started to relax, even feeling a bit happy to be included. I didn't realize it was all a trap. When we arrived, Kate and Brittany pointed out the stars. Go on ahead, Justine, they said. We'll grab some things from the car and join you. I stepped out, looking up at the stunning night sky. It was breathtaking, just as I had dreamed. But then I heard the car doors slam shut. I turned around to see them locking the doors. The engine roared to life. We'll be taking the house and the car, Kate shouted, grinning. Watch out for bears, honey. Before I could react, they sped off, leaving me alone in the wilderness. I stood frozen in shock as the RR sped away, leaving me alone in the cold, empty mountains. The only light came from the stars above. Realizing they had truly abandoned me, fear washed over me, but I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I was determined to survive. I had my own backup plan. Meanwhile, Kate and Brittany were celebrating. Confident they had succeeded, they decided to treat themselves. Let's have dinner at a fancy restaurant, Kate said, thrilled by their victory. But their joy didn't last long. When they arrived home, they were met with a shocking sight. Several police cars parked in the driveway. I was standing there, calm and composed, next to my father and a group of officers. What? How are you here? Kate stammered, her face pale. I met their disbelief with a quiet smile, one that held all the pain they had caused me. Brittany tried to sneak away, but the officers stopped her. Unknown to them, I had shared my GPS location with my father, a precaution he had insisted on since I was young. Coming from a wealthy family, we knew the risks of being targeted, and my father had prepared for everything. The moment I pressed the emergency button on my phone, he was alerted. Thanks to a private jet that could land in the clear, open area where they had left me, I was rescued within minutes, unharmed. My father took me to a family retreat to recover, and the next day, I gave the police everything they needed. During the car ride, I had secretly recorded our entire conversation, following my father's advice to always record anything suspicious. When I played back Kate's voice saying, "We'll be taking the house and car. Watch out for bears," it was crystal clear and damning evidence. The police arrested both Kate and Brittany on the spot, charging them with attempted murder and fraud. Brittany collapsed in shock, while Kate fainted. Their disgraceful behavior didn't go unnoticed. News cameras captured everything, and the story quickly spread. What they had hoped would be their victory turned into a public scandal, and their lives would never be the same. "I only did it because Mom told me to." Brittany sobbed uncontrollably, breaking down as she blamed Kate for everything. Meanwhile, another truth came to light. Olivier had been with his mistress the entire time. He even testified against his family to save himself. Finding out about Olivier's mistress was another blow, but by then, it felt like just another betrayal in a sea of lies. The media latched onto the story, portraying Kate as the mother-in-law who plotted to steal millions. Headlines mocked their downfall, and the stories spread like wildfire across national news. My parents, both well-known professionals, were dragged into the spotlight because of the attention. On social media, rumors about Kate and Brittany using my personal belongings ran rampant. Olivier, who had once prided himself on his reputation, couldn't even step outside without facing shame. To make things worse for them, someone leaked Kate and Brittany's phone numbers, and they were flooded with calls. For a moment, I almost pitied them, but mostly I felt relief. The next day, their bank accounts were frozen, and everything they owned was seized. Without Olivier's financial support, they couldn't afford anything. News of Olivier's mistress spread online, and his reputation was completely destroyed. He had betrayed me, and now he had lost everything, including his dignity. I later learned that Olivier had been living with his mistress from the very beginning. The kindness he once showed me felt like a cruel lie. Why had he married me if he never truly loved me? My heart ached from the pain and betrayal, but I promised myself I would move on. Kate and Brittany were evicted from their luxury apartment and forced into public housing. It didn't take long for their new address to be leaked online. Kate's mental state deteriorated quickly. She wandered around muttering that her life was over. Brittany, on the other hand, was shunned by her family. Both faced the full consequences of their greed and selfishness. Brittany tried to take on part-time jobs, but struggled because she lacked both skills and work ethic. One day, she messaged me, "Justine, please help me get a job like yours. Working at weddings and wearing nice clothes sounds like something I could do." I ignored her message. The bridal industry wasn't something to take lightly, and they had brought this ruin upon themselves. Kate eventually moved into a rundown apartment that was falling apart, surrounded by graffiti and decay. I was finally free from their toxic influence, ready to rebuild my life without them. Their greed had destroyed them, and I was determined to create a better future for myself. I left the house I shared with Olivier without looking back. I didn't even bother taking my belongings. Everything felt tainted by their careless hands. Returning to my parents' home, I felt safer, though the emotional scars stayed with me. One day, Olivier called me out of the blue. Seeing his name on my phone screen made my stomach turn. A wave of dread washed over me. "Justine, I'm so sorry. I've cut ties with my mom. Please, let's try again," he pleaded. I listened, but his voice grated on me. His grand promises meant nothing now. I couldn't forget how easily he had betrayed me. "I'll protect you forever," he added. But his words felt empty, hollow. I didn't need his protection. I could stand on my own. "Maybe your mistress could use your protection instead," I replied coldly, my voice steady. For a moment, memories of the good times we shared crossed my mind, but I quickly pushed them away. How had I been so blind? That night, I sobbed, letting out all the pain and anger I had been holding inside for so long. Meanwhile, Kate sat alone in her rundown apartment, consumed by bitterness. She refused to accept what had happened and decided to fight back in her own twisted way. Desperate, she hired a private investigator to dig up anything she could use against me. "I don't belong here," she muttered angrily. "This is all a terrible mistake. Detective, find something, anything." On Justine, the investigator found nothing incriminating, only details about my recent activities. But even that small amount of information made Kate's eyes light up with malice. "Justine has PTSD," she murmured to herself. "This is my chance. I'll make her pay for everything." Fueled by her desperation, she began plotting again. Olivier, equally miserable, supported her plan. "Mom, if you succeed, share some of the money with me. I want to build a new home by the coast," he said, clinging to his own selfish dreams. Completely unaware of their new scheme, I focused on rebuilding my life, trying to find peace and move on. One evening, as I began to settle into my new routine, everything changed again. I was walking alone when I saw Kate appear on the sidewalk. She looked worn out, her clothes shabby and her face gaunt, but a sinister grin spread across her lips. "Guess the bears didn't get you. Must have been freezing in those mountains, huh?" she sneered. Her sudden appearance brought back a flood of terrifying memories. My body began to shake as the trauma of that night resurfaced. The fear, the loneliness, the feeling of being abandoned. Kate pulled out her phone and pointed it at me, recording as I stumbled back, powerless and frozen in place. "I have you now," she hissed. "Pay me, or I'll spread this video all over the internet." Her threat made no sense, but the sight of her was enough to terrify me. My heart raced as she smirked, climbed into a waiting car, and disappeared, leaving me standing there, paralyzed with fear. Realizing I couldn't face this alone, I called my father. He was furious when I told him what happened, knowing how much pain Kate and her family had already caused me. Without hesitation, he used every resource at his disposal to protect me and uncover the truth. It wasn't long before my father discovered evidence of Olivier's illegal activities, including tax evasion and embezzlement. When confronted with the proof, Olivier had no choice but to confess. His mistress, Alicia, who had been living lavishly on his stolen money, was blindsided by the revelation. "You lied to me, Olivier. I didn't know my name was on those loans," she cried, her face pale with fear. "You always wanted more vacations, more luxuries," Olivier snapped back. "You said we'd have hundreds of millions." But their lies and manipulations had finally caught up to them. Olivier's accounts were frozen, and he lost everything. Alicia, desperate to clear her name, pleaded with the media. "I didn't know. I thought he was honest." "I'm a victim too," she insisted. The tabloids ran wild with the story, painting her as both a helpless mistress and a scheming accomplice, depending on the headline. Olivier's world crumbled completely. Even Kate, who had played a massive role in the chaos, turned her back on him. "You're no son of mine. Not after all the shame you've brought on us," she spat, abandoning him the moment he became useless to her. With no one left to support him, Olivier was utterly alone. The family that had exploited and betrayed others for their own gain was now in ruins. Each of them was paying the price for their greed and selfishness. Desperate, Olivier and Kate decided to make one final move. They planned to escape by taking a flight and disappearing entirely. But my father, always vigilant, anticipated their plan. When they arrived at the airport, security was waiting for them. Their attempt to flee was intercepted, and they had nowhere left to run. Their downfall was complete, and justice had finally caught up to them. "I did it all for my son's happiness." Kate's desperate voice echoed through the airport terminal as she screamed, half out of her mind. Even in her breakdown, she was quick to throw Olivier under the bus. Watching their meltdown felt unreal. It was like seeing the full extent of their selfishness on display for the world to witness. Olivier stood there, visibly shaken, muttering about the life he'd lost. "I was supposed to have a new life with Alicia," he said, his voice trembling. Hearing those words stung deeply. He had completely disregarded me, the woman who had once loved him and promised to share a life with him. I had given him everything, only to be discarded like I didn't matter. Looking back, I realized that betrayal was a rare experience for me. But Olivier's betrayal had cut deeper than anything I'd ever known. I knew it would take time for that wound to heal. As I watched from a distance, I saw Alicia take control of the situation. She held a press conference, announcing herself as the new CEO of Olivier's company. "I will restore the company's reputation and protect the livelihoods of our employees," she declared confidently. Despite her flaws, Alicia was now proving herself to be more capable than Olivier had ever been. While she moved forward, Olivier was stripped of everything: his title, possessions, and reputation. He was left with nothing, forced to live on the streets. Kate, meanwhile, spiraled into a mental breakdown, repeatedly muttering that Olivier had betrayed her. Their selfishness and greed had brought them to this point of complete ruin, leaving them to face the emptiness of their lives alone. Month by month, they struggled to repay their debts, a slow and painful descent into despair that was only just beginning. Watching from afar, I felt nothing but detachment. I had begun to heal from my PTSD, slowly regaining my strength and stability. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could laugh at the absurdity of it all, seeing a once powerful family fall so low. But my ordeal had given me a new purpose. I wanted to help others who felt trapped and helpless, those who had no one to turn to. My experience had shown me the toll toxic families could take, and I knew I wanted to create a safe haven for people in similar situations. Although I had to leave my job in the bridal industry due to my PTSD, I found new meaning in this mission. I wanted to provide others with the refuge I had so desperately needed. It was a fresh start for me, a way to turn my pain into something good. I shared my idea with my parents, and they supported me completely. They guided me through the steps I needed to take, understanding qualifications, legal requirements, and how to hire the right people. With their help, I gained knowledge, did online research, and worked on improving my skills. I started studying for certifications and talked to people who could give me advice. Slowly, my dream began to feel more real, and I found myself enjoying the challenge. The family retreat, where I had once been rescued, became the site of my first refuge center. We kept the location a secret, only sharing a phone number with those in need. I wanted it to be a place where people could escape without fear. Motivated by my desire to help others heal, I even earned a counseling qualification. When the refuge center finally opened, I felt a wave of hope. I wished no one would ever need to use it, but I knew that wasn't realistic. There would always be someone trapped in an unsafe situation, searching for a way out. I hoped my experiences could bring light to others in their darkest moments. Meanwhile, Kate, Brittany, and Olivier were still struggling with their financial troubles. They were paying for everything they had taken, a reminder that debts must eventually be repaid. One day, a woman arrived at the refuge. She was escaping from an abusive family. I looked at her and said, "You've done well by getting out. I'm proud of you." She hesitated, then smiled through her tears. "Thank you. I thought it was all my fault." I reassured her. "It's not your fault. It's okay to feel the pain and to set boundaries. Here, you're safe. You don't have to worry about anyone finding you." My father's security company guarded the facility 24/7, making sure everyone was protected. It became a safe haven, not just for me, but for others who needed a fresh start. Over time, the refuge grew, welcoming more people who needed a family they could trust. I began to smile again, genuinely, for the first time in years. Helping others heal brought me peace and reminded me that even from pain, something beautiful could grow.